Welcome. Glad to see we have a packed room today. We have an excellent session. Thank you for joining us for the National Colloquium 2013 Juvenile Justice and Child Welfare Process and Placement for Sex Trafficking Survivors. I did want to remind everybody starting off that we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise from stakeholders in child serving agencies, from service providers, from survivor advocacy here in this audience, here especially on our panels, but also watching across the country live via webcast. And with that in mind, we've left plenty of time during this discussion for questions and answers. For those of you watching on the webcast, you can ask questions via Twitter at #SharingTheHope. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the official welcome by introducing Shared Hope's President and Founder, Congresswoman Linda Smith.
Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. It just seems like it was just a few weeks ago, but it wasn't. It was a year ago that we were together. So how many of you were here at the last colloquium? Lots of you. You that weren't here, you missed something, but I am so thankful that we're going on and doing this good work. Like so much of the good work of Shared Hope and the work around the nation, I get to hear about it. Yes, there's such good people that we can't all do everything. And this particular event brings all of that good knowledge together so that we can put it together and make it something better. Well, first of all, I want to thank Eliza. How many of you had a personal discussion with Eliza yet? Yep, that's why she won't answer my phone calls. And I want to thank our partners at Casey Family Programs. Would you raise your hand, you from Casey Family Programs? Yeah, very good, thank you. Let's give them a hand. And the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Raise your hand if you're a judge. Yeah, thank you. Well, last year we had ECPAT USA and the Protection Project as our partners, and we focused the colloquium on inventory and evaluating current services available to trafficked youth. Many of you were a part of that. The goal of this year's National Colloquium is to improve protective responses to identified victims of domestic minor sex trafficking by exploring promising policies and practices within the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. These are practices that focus on the understanding and overcoming of existing policy barriers and gaps, and to try to allow for an expansion of access to an array of services. Now, that was a lot of words, but I think you probably got it. Reducing trauma, promoting collaboration and development of promising practices, and to provide safe alternatives to detainment in juvenile detention. Today, we're joined both in the audience and those watching remotely, and especially through the wealth of expertise on our panels by leaders from juvenile justice, child welfare, runaways, and homeless youth, NGOs, and survivor advocacy groups. It is our charge to work with all of you to not just continue the dialogue, but to learn and build upon it to help inform system processes and to be a catalyst for system improvement that will provide youth with the quality service they so desperately need and they deserve. We are very aware, and I know a lot of you, that many in this group are survivors. You're survivor leaders, you're survivor servants, you provide services, and you're here maybe for the first time in anything that focuses on trafficking. For you, you are the most important people in this room. We admire you, we take great courage from you, and we learn a lot from you. We want to thank you, and we will several times during this conference if you're here for the 3 days, but especially today. There is an event for you survivors tonight, and it's closed to the rest of you for you all to hang out. So don't forget that. If you don't know about it, grab one of us that has, looks like they know something. We all have black suits. but not everybody with black suits is shared hope, but usually we have black suits, and ask us how you get to that closed event. Thank you again, and I look forward to the results of this colloquium meeting.
Shoot, I missed the memo. I wore navy blue. But I'm still with Shared Hope. Please ask me. Like Linda said, we are really honored to have wealth of expertise in our partnership in both the juvenile justice and child welfare system. And so to welcome you from the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, I'd like to welcome the Honorable Judge Puig-Lugo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hiram Puig-Lugo. I'm Deputy Presiding Judge of the Family Court of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia and a proud member of the National Council of Family and Court Judges, Juvenile and Family Court Judges. I am honored to read to you a set of remarks from our Chief Executive Officer, who unfortunately could not join us today. And these remarks read as follows. Dear participants, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges is pleased to be a partner in the National Colloquium 2013, Judicial Process and Placement for Juvenile Sex Trafficking Victims and Survivors, and to work with other sponsoring organizations to pursue improved outcomes for victims of domestic child sex trafficking. Studies have shown youth who are involved in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, whether currently or in the past, are vulnerable to becoming a victim of child sex trafficking. The most recent sweep of the FBI's Operation Cross Country indicated that 60% of child sex trafficking victims were children from foster care or group homes. In another study, nearly 50% of trafficking victims had a history of prior arrest or detentions, and over 80% of female victims had a history of running away. The National Council recognizes the judiciary's role and is committed to preventing these youth from further victimization. Work on the issues related to domestic child sex trafficking began in December of 2012. In February of this year, the National Council's Board of Trustees passed a resolution calling for judicial action to address this growing problem. In July, a three-part session on domestic child sex trafficking was held at the National Council's 76th Annual Conference in Seattle, Washington. Last month, the National Council convened a community roundtable discussion to discuss the appropriate role of the courts in addressing the needs of these victims. This meeting expanded the community of allies working to address domestic child sex trafficking to include judges and initiated a dialogue among judges, advocates, and service providers in the field and leaders in the federal government. The current goal of the National Council is to develop both a judicial curriculum and tools to educate and assist judges in raising awareness around domestic child sex trafficking and identifying victims who are already involved with juvenile and family court systems. The National Council is honored to partner with Shared Hope International and Casey Family Programs for this event and future programs. Sincerely, Mary Kay Bickett, Chief Executive Officer, National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Thank you.
Thank you. Something very exciting about today's program, and we're thrilled to see this room continuing to be packed. I hope everybody finds a chair. We are wanting to make sure that our dialogue continues after this event, both online but also through resources that we're making available to you in partnership, again, with our partner, Casey Family Programs. So to provide our final welcome for today, we'd like to introduce Christine Kalpin from Casey Family Programs.
Good afternoon. On behalf of our Board of Trustees and CEO William Bell, it's my privilege to welcome all of you and to this wonderful colloquium. I'd like to join my other partners in thanking everyone for their time and attention to this important issue area. For quick background, Casey Family Programs is the nation's largest operating foundation focused exclusively on foster care and improving the child welfare system, and we're headquartered in Seattle. As an operating foundation, we're committed to improving the lives of vulnerable children, teenagers, and their families across the nation. We believe strongly that every child deserves a safe, stable, and permanent family. Every child. And we work directly with child welfare systems in all 50 states and the District of Columbia to make this a reality. Unfortunately, we know that far too many of the young girls and boys who are victims of human trafficking have also been involved in child welfare. We also know that children who don't have safe and stable families to call their own are at a much greater risk of ending up on the streets as sex workers. We're committed to working in partnership with child welfare systems across this country to protect more vulnerable children from this terrible tragedy. The sex trafficking of youth is a cross-systems issue, and a series of agencies and stakeholders, including child welfare, needs to be involved in intervention and prevention. We are so proud to have a number of child welfare directors, judges, providers, survivors, and others here today to learn from each other and contribute to this dialogue. We recognize that while limited data exists, what data we have is so very concerning, as my dear colleague had already shared. For example, in California, the Child Welfare Council found that from 50 to 80% of victims of commercial sexual exploitation are either currently involved or had been involved with child welfare. Child welfare systems are responsible and charged with promoting the safety, permanency, and well-being of all children. Our work tells us that these systems are most successful in this work and can achieve these outcomes by collaborating and coordinating efforts with other systems, including the courts, law enforcement, mental health, housing, and education. We hope these efforts can better ensure the systems are focused on assisting these young girls and boys in healing from the traumatic effects of this abuse and neglect. It's also critical that we pay attention to the ways child welfare might create an environment of increased risk, whether placement in congregate care facilities or the lack of strong relationships. It's so important that we not lose sight on the various ways in which this is a problem. Child welfare systems are so poised to be a significant part of the solution to sex trafficking, but again, only if there is a partnership to support these youth and the child welfare agencies have the support and financial resources they need to really provide the full array of unique supports that these individual victims need. I know the conversations and dialogue today will really contribute to that, and we are so proud and pleased to be a part of this. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And now to begin our discussion, we are honored to have Catherine Chan here representing how the federal government can work with our child-serving organizations, child welfare, juvenile justice, runaway and homeless youth, and how we can intersect in those ways. Catherine serves as Senior Advisor on Human Trafficking to the Department of Health and Human Services. Thanks so much for being here, Catherine.
Thank you, Eliza. It's a pleasure for HHS to come back to the colloquium this year. I know last year, then Assistant Secretary George Sheldon was here. He got a great standing ovation at the end in that packed room. I'm not here for those purposes, but I did want to start by sharing the message that convenings like this matter, and to give you a sense of what's been happening at the federal agency level. The discussions and conversations that you had at the colloquium last year, it helped to inform, one, the federal strategic action plan on human trafficking that I'll talk a little bit more about today, and it also helped to inform the child trafficking guidance that we released a couple of months ago for child welfare and runaway homeless youth programs. And so please have lively and engaging conversations throughout the afternoon, because your perspectives matter, and actually we count on the information from the field and from service providers to inform some of what we're doing within HHS. So to start with, on the Federal Strategic Action Plan, many of you in the room are already aware of this. This has been a year-long effort across the federal government. At the Department of Health and Human Services, we've been co-chairing this process along with colleagues at the Department of Justice and Homeland Security. And this is the first time in modern history where the U.S. government is putting together a strategic action plan specifically to victim services. How do we better identify victims and then provide holistic and comprehensive services to survivors of trafficking? We received hundreds of comments and ideas through an online platform, through emails and letters. When we kind of piecemealed all that together, it was more than 1,400 distinct ideas that came from across the country. So thank you to all in the room and who are watching who participated in that. And a bit of an update, just so you have a sense of how serious the federal government took this. When the public comment period closed at the interagency level, so more than a dozen federal agencies were meeting on a weekly basis, reviewing those comments, and again, we're taking them very seriously. We're in the final stages, and the final strategic action plan will come out in early next year. And where we're looking for your ongoing partnership as the final plan comes out, look at the action items. Most of it, because it's a federal plan, they're only commitments that federal agencies can make, but if there are efforts that you're already part of that we can coordinate on, collaborate on, if you see gaps that we did not address through the public comment period, just let us know when that comes out. And then onwards to the child trafficking guidance that we released a couple months ago, we are really excited to have new leadership within the Administration for Children and Families. There's a new Associate Commissioner, Jian Chang, of the Children's Bureau, and also a new Associate Commissioner, Bill Bentley, of the Family Youth Services Bureau, which covers the runaway homeless youth programs and domestic violence programs. They are both very committed and supportive of child trafficking issues, and if you haven't had a chance to look at the guidance yet, we have some copies outside. You can look on our website to download them as well, but I just wanted to pull out a few pieces of what you'll find in that guidance because it's relevant to the conversations you'll have today. So one, we heard the field loud and clear. We need more awareness and training, screening protocols, looking at data initiatives a little bit more, having practices and intervention and prevention efforts that are survivor-informed, youth-informed, and particular to our conversation this afternoon, how do we better coordinate with the juvenile justice system and across with the Runaway Homeless Youth Program? And what you'll see in this guidance and what you'll see in the Strategic Action Plan is that at the federal level, there are ongoing conversations with our colleagues at the Department of Justice, Office of Victims of Crime, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So know that the conversations are happening, but also know that they're best informed by what we hear from the ground and from the field. So what we're always asking ourselves are the types of services that survivors need, do they exist? Are survivors and victims able to access the services as efficiently as they need to? And if there are challenges, what can we practically do through an administrative fix or a policy fix? And that's where we really need to hear from you of what actions we can take specifically at the Department of Health and Human Services, but also with our interagency colleagues. So I will leave you with those action items in terms of areas for discussion. And then I know that the conversation today is focused on child sex trafficking, but I did want to note that on the child trafficking guidance, we are mindful of child labor trafficking. Just as recently as last month, the Department of Children and Families in Florida reported cases of, or a particular case of child traffickers who had, I think, 24 children were identified, and they were being shuttled around in this van that the detectives called a wooden prison because they had all these compartments in the back of the van, and the children were starved, abused, and being forced to sell products door to door. And so it's a very real problem in our communities, and the child welfare system is coming across labor trafficking issues as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, even though there's a particular focus of conversation for this afternoon. So we look forward to hearing from you. Open doors, and thank you so much for your partnership and for being here this afternoon.
Thank you. I remember that standing ovation last year when Secretary Sheldon took us all who had been working on this issue for such a long time by storm and said, if human trafficking isn't a child welfare issue, I don't know what is. And I'm really happy to see that Catherine is continuing that momentum with the work that's happening at HHS. We talked a lot about the fact already that this is a collaborative effort, that we need to think about ways that we're working together among child advocates, child serving agencies, but also with service providers and NGOs. I'm honored to start today, though, looking specifically at the juvenile justice system with our first panel, Judicial Response Within the Juvenile Justice System. We know that kids victimized through sex trafficking continue to be routed through our juvenile justice system, and it's many times related to charges on the trafficking that happened against them. As we continue to develop trauma-informed policies and think of ways to move away from punitive responses to these kids, it is essential that our juvenile justice system is developing policies in a trauma-informed way to respond to youth that have been trafficked in our system. So at this point, I'm lucky to be joined by a wealth of expertise in this specific issue area, and I'd like to ask our panel to come join me on the stage. I hope you all see where your names are written too. Good. Again, hopefully we can see everyone's name clearly on the webcast. I wanted to reinforce while everybody is getting seated that we do have what we call concept papers. I know some people, as an effort to get into the room earlier, might have come in before all the collateral was distributed. We develop these concept papers because we know there are a litany of issues related to this particular piece of the juvenile justice system, and we want to make sure that our questions stay high level and focused. And to do that, I really am honored to be here with a group of people that are joining me here on the panel today as we work together with 3 charges from our panel, which is to identify and evaluate current court processes from the point of identifying a youth as being trafficked to the disposition of the case within the court. We're also wanting to review barriers to providing non-punitive responses and connecting trafficked youth to appropriate services, and also current approaches to overcoming some of these barriers, restraints, and limitations so that we can provide youth access to appropriate care. Joining me from left to right, you have already met the Honorable Hiram Puig-Lugo. As mentioned, Judge Puig-Lugo is Deputy Presiding Judge of the Family Court at the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Judge Puig-Lugo was appointed to the Superior Court by President Bill Clinton in 1999. Among a list of accomplishments that you will be able to see on his bio, also available. For those of you who came in a little late, we have all bios of our panelists more full out front. But he coordinates the DC PINS, which is Person in Need of Services Working Group, to find points of access within the system to ensure protective responses for victims of sex trafficking. Next to Judge Puig-Lugo, we are joined by the Honorable Donna Groman. She is a judge of the Los Angeles County Juvenile Delinquency Court at the Superior Court of Los Angeles. Judge Groman has been serving as a judicial officer since 1997 and has been serving and was most recently named by the California Judges Association as Judge of the Year in 2012. Among many initiatives, Judge Groman is implementing best practices in systemic change by addressing sex trafficking in the STAR Collaborative Court. Next to Judge Groman, we are honored to be joined by Angela Lytle, Division Director of Child Protection at Arapahoe County in Colorado. Ms. Lytle has served in the child welfare system for nearly 20 years, beginning her career with the United Methodist Children's Home, and in 2002, moving to the public sector. She has been working diligently to partner with law enforcement and the juvenile justice system through her role in child service to better respond and protect trafficking survivors. Next to Ms. Lytle, we are joined by Ms. Tina Front. Tina is executive director and founder of Courtney's House here in DC. Shared Hope has been proud to partner with Courtney's House for many years. Courtney's House is a nonprofit that provides services to trafficked youth. Ms. Front has been actively involved in raising awareness on the issue of commercial sexual exploitation of children at the national level since the year 2000. As a survivor of sex trafficking, Ms. Front is deeply committed to helping others who have been through her experiences similar to her own. And as you may see from the bios, she has a list of accomplishments that it could go on for quite some time, but we're very honored to have her here. And farthest to the left, we're joined by Ms. Melissa Snow. Melissa is currently serving as trafficking program specialist for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where she provides assistance with victim advocacy and service planning to law enforcement and social services. Prior to joining NCMEC, she was the director of the anti-trafficking program at Turnaround, a youth-serving organization and domestic violence center in Baltimore. And I must mention that we are very happy that in her list of accomplishments, Ms. Snow was also formerly in leadership at Shared Hope International. So yes, like I said, we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, so I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to the panel, starting with each of our panelists to take about 5 minutes to talk about what their program is specifically doing, working in the context of juvenile justice and specifically child sex trafficking, and also collaborative efforts within that process. So if we could start with you, Judge Puig-Lugo.
Good afternoon. There are 4 steps that we take to make sure that children who enter our courthouse can access services. And those children reach us as respondents in juvenile delinquency, child welfare, and persons in need of supervision, or PINS matters. It is not unusual for children to have cases in more than one system. The 4 steps that we take are the following. First, we construct a supportive network around them. That supportive network consists of a probation officer, a guardian ad litem, an educational advocate, and we connect them with community-based organizations who do direct service with children who've been commercially sexually exploited. In that regard, Fair Girls and the Polaris Project have been extremely helpful. Once we construct this supportive network around them, then we proceed to order assessments to help us identify the services that they need. Assessments usually include a psychoeducational evaluation, a physical examination, and where necessary, a substance abuse assessment. Once we've identified the services that they need, then we move on to ordering that those services be provided. And we work very closely with the Department of Behavioral Health here in the District of Columbia to make sure that the services that are needed are made available. They have a wide range of services that are trauma-informed and evidence-based. And it is not unusual, as you can imagine, that many of the youth are diagnosed with PTSD, depression, and need interventions such as trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. They have strained relationships with their families. They need functional family therapy, multisystemic therapy, community-based intervention. If the child has developed a substance abuse problem, then we also take steps to address that concern. The 4th step that we take once the network has been built, the needs identified, and the services ordered is monitoring how those services play out. And as you can imagine, it's a work in process. Something might work, something might not work, and you have to adjust to address situations as they arise. Now, in terms of what we have found to work for us in this process is to develop a support network outside the courthouse for those in the courthouse who are working with these cases. And many of you in this audience and on this panel have been part of that conversation. For about 2 years now, we started as a PINS subcommittee, but we morphed into the CSEC working group. And within the CSEC working group, we have had members of the Office of the Attorney General, the Child Welfare System, probation, community-based organizations. Shared Hope International has been extremely helpful, as have been Courtney's House, Fair Girls, and the Polaris Project. And we also have people from the Department of Behavioral Health to, again, we're not talking about specific cases, but we're trying to develop a comprehensive systemic approach to addressing the needs of these children. As far as the obstacles that we have encountered, frankly, one of the issues has been identifying cases. As you can imagine, it's one thing to see a young person charged with solicitation or see a young person who's a chronic runaway. But they're not the only ones who might be dealing with sexual exploitation. And we have to develop a way of identifying children who come in on robbery charges, who come in on assaultive behavior, to see whether they are also having this type of trauma and need services from us. That's at the beginning of the process. Now, at the end of the process, the risk assessment tools that we use in the juvenile delinquency system, at least from my perspective, are not appropriate for this situation. Because there are status offenders and there are status offenders. We lump them in one group, but they're not all involved in the same type of behavior. And usually a status offender, and that's where the chronic runaways come into the system, gets a very low score. So they're basically, there's a tendency to send them back in the community without the array of services that they need to address their circumstances. And in between those extremes of identifying at the beginning and risk assessment tools at the end, there's the issue of resources, resources, and resources. Those are my 5 minutes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Judge Groman.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Shared Hope, the National Council, and Casey Family Foundation for having me here today. I'm just so delighted to meet enlightened judges from other parts of the country. There are many, and it's very exciting to be part of this growing process of concern. I wasn't always an enlightened judge. Even though I've been working in the juvenile court field as a lawyer and a judge for 30 years. My awakening came when an enraged public defender couldn't understand why I wouldn't acknowledge a defense of coercion. And my response to the public defender in the case was, this young person had a choice and decided to go back into the street. And when that public defender became enraged, it really made me stop and think about how we are dealing with our young people involved in commercial sexual exploitation in our juvenile courts. Another awakening came when I got a call from one of my colleagues, a judge who wanted to know how we can find more confinement time. Prostitution charges generally carry a 6-month maximum. Well, that 6 months was running out, and this judge was really concerned that this young person was going to be back on the street, and she thought she needed to find some more confinement time to keep that child safe. It was a combination of that and the experience that I've had in my own cases, which led me to search for a different approach to CSEC youth in Los Angeles County. We have approximately 180 petitions each year that are filed that allege prostitution-related charges. However, as other speakers have pointed out, youth that we know are involved in sex trafficking, there are 45% of those youth who have no prostitution-related charges. So part of the process in Los Angeles County has been to assess and to find youth who are in court for other charges but are in need of services that are specialized in this area. A startling 85 to 90% of the young people charged with prostitution-related crimes are African American in Los Angeles County, in a population of perhaps 10% in the general population. Most of these cases stem from one primary area in Los Angeles County, the Compton, South Los Angeles, and Watts area. So we have established through a grant, which started in 2012, a Title II grant, to set up a STAR court, Succeed Through Achievement and Resilience. That's what it stands for. And it's a collaborative court along the lines of a drug court, where cases are conferenced before they're called, so our young people know what's likely to happen. There are no surprises in that court. We have our strategic partners who are trained, specially trained, to serve in this role. We have the prosecutor, the minor's attorney, an education attorney. We find that many of these youth really want to go to school, so to have an education attorney to help them recover credits that have been lost in all the transitions they've gone through, to help them be reconnected with special education services so that they could thrive better in school. We have a job training coach who's available to the team, and specialized probation officers who carry cases from the beginning to the end of the case, as opposed to the always continuing transition of probation officers that serve our youth generally. These folks conference before the case is called, consult with the young person and their parent caretaker, and come up with a plan. When that young person comes into our system first, of course we do assessment and determine what services they're needed. But I think one of the things that we do is, if that young person has come through the child welfare system, which is frequent, we want to connect them with a permanent, lifelong connection, an adult. And so from the very beginning of that case, we're looking for somebody who can serve as that lifelong connection for that young person. We assign mentors, many of whom are survivors, either through the Mary Magdalene Project, and we're also developing our own alumni mentorship project. We're still relying on detention in juvenile justice. In our state, child welfare does not file these cases because they could only file cases where the abuse and neglect stems from the parents and caretakers in a home. But we're pulling them along, and we're making great progress. Our County Board of Supervisors has mandated that child welfare establish programs for these youth, acknowledging that 80% of the youth who are in our STAR court have ties to the child welfare system. Cases are referred to the STAR court. Los Angeles County is really big. We have 9 different locations of delinquency courts. We have a total of 22 courtrooms that handle delinquency cases. We have another 20 that handle dependency cases, which are the abuse and neglect cases. So we actually have 42 juvenile court judges in our LA County system. But there are cases that happen in other areas of the county besides the one location in Compton Juvenile Court where Commissioner Pratt holds STAR Court every Tuesday. Each of our youth comes to the court at least once a month, which is in stark contrast to the usual every 6-month progress report. And I think that Commissioner Pratt's connection with those young people is vital. When youth run away and come back to the system, they're not greeted with, "You didn't listen to what I said. You ran away from 3 placements, so you're now going to camp." Instead, she greets them with, "It's good to see you. I'm glad that you're safe." And this is just such a huge difference from the typical response that you see in the juvenile justice system. Barriers. Here's the one barrier that I think if we could get past this, we can really accomplish a lot. We need to have a 24-hour triage center available where police can take our young people instead of arresting them and taking them to juvenile hall. We need a place where probation officers, social workers who pick up youth who have been on an AWOL status can take them to a triage center where the first person they should encounter is a supportive adult. And from there, within that 24 hours, attend to their medical needs, their mental health needs, setting them up with a plan from where they go from now on. What I hear from police officers is that in that moment that they have to make a decision when they apprehend a young person on the street, they don't know what to do with this young person, other to take them to the police station or to bring them to child services. If we had a 24-hour hub located, in LA County, there's going to have to be more than one hub, but a place where every person involved in the system knows that they could bring that youth, I think that would accomplish so much. Just like we've made so much progress in domestic violence and rape crisis, we need to bring up our CSEC response to the same level. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Groman. Ms. Lytle?
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I love your city. It's fun to visit. And I love the idea of a triage center. I wrote that down. I sure wish I could actually own the title of an expert or an enlightened professional when it comes to human trafficking, but I cannot. And I actually come from a state that still has a great deal of study to do in regards to learning how to properly identify, respond, shelter, and treat the young people coming to our attention. I actually came initially to learn here and now have an opportunity to share with you what it is we're trying to do in Colorado. We have some really good, solid work going on in law enforcement, both at the local, state, and federal levels. The collaboration between our local law enforcements and then the FBI is really very good work. Unfortunately, child welfare was brought to the table very, very late. So law enforcement started to bring in the young folks, and then their next question was, great, we have them, now what do we do with them? Like in LA County, Colorado has one option in front of them at this point in time with the young people they're picking up, and that is detention also. So our young kids are going into detention, being held, charged with prostitution and other status offenses. The way it came to our attention, in at least my county and probably several other Metro Denver area counties, that this was a growing problem in Colorado, was we were called in to the bench and ordered to place a child into a facility, a congregate care facility, about 200 miles south of Denver, who apparently had a specialized prostitution program. So through order, our very first young woman was placed, only to learn that that specialized program also served sex offenders. Not a good combination. Identification of the young people coming to our attention is first and foremost our primary obligation. We are statutorily and ethically obligated to do a thorough, clinically dynamic assessment of the young people coming to our attention. So slowing down the front door and having that conversation with law enforcement, allowing things to slow down in order for us to step in and do our work well, is absolutely one of the most important first steps to take in properly responding to the young people coming to our attention. In those decisions, therefore, we can make better decisions about shelter. Those kids coming to our attention need their bellies filled. They need to be seen by a doctor. They need a fresh, clean, safe, physical environment in which to go first. Then we can take care of the other issues. But wrapping them with something safe and secure very first is going to give us the very best opportunity to do what we need to do and do what we need to do right on behalf of the young people coming to us. Our conversations with law enforcement and FBI have actually been going really well in that arena, allowing us to slow down, bring us to the table right away to do that proper identification and shelter decisions. Colorado has a fairly underdeveloped service delivery system. However, there is a great deal of passion and a great deal of motivation to build what it is we need to build. It's amazing when a specialized population comes to our attention in our world, how many experts are all of a sudden coming to the table, and they know exactly what needs to be done. We're a little cautious about that, right? We want to make sure that there's trauma-informed work. Again, making sure the basic needs are being met really thoroughly for each child coming to our attention. So we're really cautious, and we're going to be really picky about who it is can be our experts in serving our populations. We've got to get out from behind our desks, climb on planes, go over our state lines, and find programs that are producing really positive outcomes for these kids, because it's existed in our nation, unfortunately, for a very, very long time. And there are folks in our nation working really well with these kids, and they don't necessarily have to go into residential care or congregate care. They can be served in their communities safely, and we know this because we've been doing our homework, and we're finding programs who are producing really good outcomes at reintegrating our young people safely and sustainably as citizens, which is a great outcome for those that we work with. The other aspect of our work has to be community awareness. Folks don't want to hear that this is going on in our state or in our country. But it's our responsibility, just like other forms of abuse and neglect, to bring it to our community's responsibility, because that's the only way, ultimately, we're going to keep our kids safe in Colorado or in DC or any of the other states. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Front?
Wow, am I fighting the urge to walk the whole stage? If you've heard me speak before sitting down, I'm like, wow, how do people do this? Tina Front, I'm the founder of Courtney's House, based right here in DC. Thank you so much to the Casey Foundation having me here again. Of course, Shared Hope, who not only supports Courtney's House, but many survivors. A quick hello to my survivor family here in the room and online. It's great to see you, and I know you're there online, and Courtney House supporters. Now, with all that said, I got like 3 minutes. So I'm going to tell you everything in 3 minutes that we do. So really I want to start with kind of the 2 tiers of what we're doing with the juvenile detention centers in the area. So we'll start with the services that we're providing, how they're coming to us with that connection, and then the training component as well. So we have always kind of reached out, but not just, but always reached out to the juvenile justice system. Within my own story of being arrested and charged at 15 for prostitution, unfortunately, we won't count the years ago. We'll say yesterday, whatever. Even today, that is still going on. Now, the change would be that there is more awareness in trying to understand the right services to have for both boys and girls who are trafficked inside the United States. So that would be a definite change. Courtney's House is unique. We're unique where we work with 12 to 21 years old, both male and females, and always have been, and trans girls as well, and always have. With that uniqueness, that means there has to be a specialized training to identify boys and males who are trafficked, and the right signs and how they're trafficked. So one of the things we do with that is for the state of Maryland, I'm really going to let Melissa expand a little bit more about that for the state of Maryland Juvenile Detention Center, the assessment tool with that. But what we did with all the high-up officials as well, trickled down to the people who actually work right there inside the juvenile detention centers. We did a training, and that training was specifically for boys. And we trained on what were the signs for boys to be trafficked and identified, and how are they trafficked within the system. What was actually happening was that the boys who were being trafficked was not, as she said, getting prostitution charges. There were from other charges as well. But what was happening when they're inside the juvenile detention in the state of Maryland, we were getting them when they're placed in mental health facilities and also in DC. In DC, we would get them as well after they got out of juvenile detention. They would be red flagged at a mental health institution where we have already trained, and then we were called, but they were missed inside the system. So with that being said, we really saw that a training needed to be combined. So we conducted a training, and thank you to Melissa Snow and Turnaround, who really helped push us on the male side of having specialized training. Now, why is that important? the training didn't just happen for the people who are inside that juvenile detention center who are working with the kids every day. You're going to do trainings, it needs to trickle up and then down. It has to be everybody. The high turnover rates inside the juvenile detention center, then we're missing people. It has to come for high up, and it has to be a mandatory training that's consistent. So when that person leaves, this is going to continuously happen this way. So people are still going to be identified, and I think that's very important. Now, the next step is obviously services. So there's a few things that I think we do differently.